This is Deceleration, deceleration.news, where we are remembering Jack Elder, activist, peacemaker, defender of human rights, and La Madre, Tierra. And this is Marisol Cortez, executive editor of Deceleration.
Jack Elder came to national attention in the 1980s for his work in the sanctuary movement, which aimed to assist refugees and asylum-seekers from the U.S.-backed wars in Central America. But he was also a math teacher, a friend, a father of 5 and grandfather of 7, and an all-around good neighbor who was active in San Antonio's movements for social and environmental justice. For many years, he volunteered at Catholic Worker House, washing dishes and tending to the gardens there. He walked and rode his bike everywhere, until Parkinson's made that too difficult. And until the end of his life, he cultivated beautiful, xeriscaped front and backyards. In every way, he modeled what it means to live close to the earth and in service to others, and we're honored to have known and learned from him. In the process, and especially in a moment when the national conversation has been so completely seized by the life and death of someone who sought to dominate and persecute the vulnerable, we've given a lot of thought to this question of who we choose to remember and how we remember them. We felt it was important to really take the time to collect these deep histories of Jack's life so that we can remember them well and keep them close to our own lives. Who and what we give our attention to matters, and Jack deserves our attention. To preserve some of the stories and memories and lessons of his life, we talked to 3 friends who knew Jack in different capacities. George Cisneros, co-founder and co-director of the Southside Arts Collective Urban 15, met Jack in the 1970s as an activist in local anti-war and peace movements. The Borderlands writer Nicolas Flores crossed paths with Jack in the 1980s in the sanctuary movement down in the Rio Grande Valley, and later he based a character on Jack in his novel Sex as a Political Condition. And Leslie Provence met Jack through his love for urban gardens and native plants, and remained his close friend and neighbor until the end of his life. Jack Elder, presente. Your life continues to inspire us and show us what it means to be a good ancestor in this life, on this earth, and in this historical moment full of so much suffering for so many.
That initial meeting, I don't remember if it was spring of 72 or perhaps a little bit earlier, but by the late 70s, Jack was well known throughout Central Texas as being one of the he was never dominant. One of the prominent and most influential of the peacemakers in the community. There were a lot of hotheads and firebrands throughout the 70s, especially in the anti-Vietnam and the anti-war and anti-draft movements. But Jack surfaced, or even was below the surface of all that pandemonium and everybody vying to be, I'm the most radical, I'm the most liberal, I'm the most, whatever. And he kind of remained below the surface, and he was always like the negotiator and the guy concerned about wellness and mental health, and he was far ahead of his time in I would say the radical movement, because he was really a peaceful man during a time when people were actually moving towards a little bit higher level of violence and anger. When we became closer friends was, I suppose, in the 80s, when he was always seen trying to collect medical supplies and children's toys and clothes, and he was developing networks within Mexico and Guatemala first, and Nicaragua and Costa Rica, Panama, networks where people needed health care and medical supplies. So they arrested him. He stood trial and was sentenced to house arrest. And they sentenced him to a little house over here. I think it was on Dewey Street, right near Sac. It was between St. Mary's and McCullough. The time there was it was a student neighborhood, and the most wonderful guardian angel of our community, who was one of the first ladies to deal with housing and hiding political refugees from Central America. Her name was Laura Sanchez, and she had a safe peace house. And I had heard that he had been, I think he was tried in Houston at a federal court, but they sentenced him to work at that space. And I think there was an early version of an ankle bracelet on him at that time.
I have a question. So was he arrested, convicted, sentenced to house arrest? Because I read it was like related to taking some folks to the bus station, but I know that he also was, I think he's actually in a novel. He shows up in a novel by the writer Nicolas Flores. Do you know him? Has a book called Sex as a Political Condition. And I believe that one of the characters is based on Jack Elder, and the character in the novel is involved kind of crossing the border, transporting medical supplies in a bus.
I met Jack Elder when I was trying to help out a refugee from El Salvador. Okay, and he was here, the refugee. I met him through another friend, in fact, here in San Ignacio. And, the refugee asked for help. And I said, because he needed to get out of here, go somewhere up north. And I said, well, I really don't know how to go about this. So eventually I made contact with somebody who knew about the sanctuary movement in the Rio Grande Valley. And so I went there, and that's where I met Jack Elder. He at Casa Romero.
Okay.
And of course, he impressed me as a stalwart comrade, as it were. I had no intention of getting involved because I had a lot of other things on my plate, and but I did it anyway out of just favor to this guy. And so then Jack Elder in turn put me in contact with this other refugee center or sanctuary center in San Antonio. It was run by a priest and a nun. Then I became very good friends with them. And so that was it. They I guess took over from there. Managed to get the refugee from San Ignacio to San Antonio, and that was the end of it. And then afterwards, I don't know, he just stuck in my mind. And of course, my friends spoke well of him. And then later on, I think he himself was not involved in the convoy that I was part of, but definitely I think he was involved in some of the other ones. And so I don't know, he just struck me, and I combined his image, with some other characters that I had met, throughout the years, and that became the commander.
We were both volunteering for Green Spaces Alliance, and he asked Michelle Gorham for my email, and he emailed me and asked me out.
And that was when was that?
Would it be 2016 or like 2013 maybe? I'd have to look back on my phone and see when pictures started and stuff.
Yeah.
When Jack was arrested in the valley, he had come to national attention already, and so there were news trucks there, and the officer, whoever it was, that came to arrest him, came at night. And he said, I'm not going to let it take me, at night. And, I want everybody to see. So he snuck out the back, and CPS News picked him up in the alley and took him away. So they had to come back the next day, and there was, they were in a little trailer with their kids. 4 of them were born at that time. And, so he hugged them all goodbye out in front of the trailer and, made a big thing about it, because he didn't want it to be in the dark of night. He wanted everybody to see what they were doing.
Right.
And somehow or another, it came to me, hey, this guy is in house arrest and he needs books. He needs stuff. The only way you could reach him was come through the back door of that house where he was staying. Little tiny apartment. I don't think it was bigger than maybe 9 by 12. The room, and then there was a giant shared kitchen with all these people from all over, mainly Central America. And Jack was like twice as tall as everybody in the room, because little wonderful indigenous women that were 4'2" or something, and Jack was almost 6 feet or more. But anyway, so I found out from Laura how to do a knock on the door, on the gate, and then wait and do another knock. I was just like I was saying, what is this? A spy who came in from the cold or something? But he opened the door and he welcomed me in, and we had sort of, like I said, we had interacted through the years and just bumped. But he was saying, "Why? What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have your stuff. I have some stuff for you." And I gave it to him, and it was, I don't know what it was. It was like a book on Bertrand Russell and
Nice.
An Aztec history book, and I think there was as usual back then. Even I think there was a thesaurus, something, and some nibbles, just some food, and maybe every 3 or 4 weeks I'd drop by and give him something, and then he'd give the books back and said, "Oh, well, how Jack was."
So was he in Laura Sanchez's
Yeah,
home
home.
when he was under house
Yeah.
arrest? That's where he was.
He wasn't really house arrest. It was a house arrest because he couldn't leave those premises.
Okay.
She signed for him
I
somehow
see.
or another.
Did they know? Did the judge and the courts and stuff know that he was going to
Do a safe house? I don't think so. That's why there was a rear entrance where it was all
Yeah.
it was all cool. But then I guess we got together. No, I think about it. When I left my job, when I was working in Austin, Commission on Arts, I came back here in, I think, May of 95 or 96. May of 95, yeah. And we saw each other, and Jack told me, "George, you won't believe this." And I said, "What?" What? He said, "You were the only person that ever visited me when I was in house arrest, because all my friends thought they would be under surveillance, and you were dumb enough to show up." And I thought that was the highest compliment that Jack could give me. And you were dumb enough to show up.
Well, I always admired Elder's commitment. I admired his idealism. I admired his awareness, and his his willingness to sacrifice himself and his family, to this cause. Trying to help these refugees coming up from Central America. And then, of course, he was part of the entire establishment there of Casa Romero.
We see people that are peacemakers in this community, particularly Maria Antonieta, but she's a hothead compared to Jack. She's spicy, and Jack was just extremely mellow. And I always thought his name was proper because he was an elder. And the thing is that one thing which I don't know how to do, and that is to really learn how to be a peacemaker. And I don't know how to do that. And it's a skill set that I wish I had. I'm not talking about negotiation or a person that kind of like gets everybody to compromise or something. He was just he made peace an entity in the room. I mean, that was the thing, you know. He really wanted to get the bad vibes out of the room.
Yeah.
And I would, you know, always admire a person who can do that, because I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's not an acquired thing, I don't think. I think it's inside of you, and I think that we have to, as people, make a decision that that's the part of you that needs to come to the surface.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
And I just look back and say, God, how do you learn that? How do you know that?
Yeah. Did he, one of the things I talked about with George, and George didn't know, he said Jack never really talked about it, but one of the things that always impressed me a lot about Jack was that he was such a gentle person, but I could see that there was this righteous anger in him too. And I always wondered, because we all, you know, especially if we do activism, like we all have to sort of like have a process to transform, whether it's anger or woundedness or grief or, you know, into something useful, so that it's not self-destructive, or so that you don't sort of like act out in the community, you know, that you, the wounds that you haven't processed in yourself. And so I always wondered about, like, Jack, like, you know, did he have a discipline, or did he have what was the inner work that he went through? Was it in the past? Did he kind of always have to do it to be able to act in the world with such gentleness and attentiveness to others? You know, he just did the work. Like, there was nothing, and that was something George said too. There was nothing dramatic about it. He just did the work, you know.
It was, and usually on a very personal level. He did go to demonstrations and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think he just by nature was a very compassionate person, and you know, the activism that got him into trouble was driving immigrants to the bus station.
Right.
And he got busted for that, and spent time, as you know, in a halfway house here. I think the experience of that, and then he was divorced twice from his wife. I think those were humbling experiences. But I think, you know, as a Catholic, he had kind of a built-in humility also, along with that righteous anger. Like you said, it was, you know, wasn't just one or the other thing that was in him.
Yeah. You met in doing like the food justice, kind of like native plants kind of work that Jack was also, I know, really into. Yeah. Can you talk more about kind of that dimension of your relationship to him, or those memories of, you know, Jack as an activist?
He volunteered at Catholic Worker House when it was on Nolan. He did the gardens. I mean, Green Spaces built the garden boxes. But he sort of tended the gardens, and he washed dishes there and got them to save coffee grounds and compost and stuff.
So it sounds like when you met Jack, he was already pretty into kind of permaculture, plants.
He had done that berm and swale in his backyard, and every time I went over, there was a tour of the backyard to see. He had a bluewood condalia on that berm, and I watched it go from a bush to a big tree over the years.
Mm-hmm. Do you know when he kind of got into that aspect of his activism, or even just his, not even his activism, but his just his life ways, right? Like, was that always kind of a dimension of the activism he did, or was that later that developed?
The intentional minimalism and poverty was an ethos that came out of their experiences in Central America. And so the way Dee puts it is, imagine that you decide to live the way that the poorest person in your neighborhood lives. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of Jack made do with so little, and he was famous with, was it Robert Puentes, the head of SAWS for so long. Mm-hmm. He would show him his water bill, and it was like the minimal that they had to charge him, because he used rainwater. He built a deck on the back of his house that had a tin roof, and he collected it just in buckets and put that into barrels, and he would water his landscape with that.
Yeah.
He was just a very frugal person, but also a very generous person.
Right.
You couldn't go over there without him giving you something or feeding you something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you remember most about Jack as a friend?
Very generous with his time and his attention. When I met him, he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's about 5 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And he told me that, when he was teaching at Poe, middle school math, his handwriting was getting so small that, the students were saying, they called him Mr. Yak. Mr. Yak, I can't see that. And that's, micrographia is one of the symptoms of Parkinson's. So the symptoms came on even before the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And most people don't live more than about 8 years with Parkinson's, but he lived at least 15 or 20 years with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's because he had been so active and fit in his younger years. Mm-hmm. When I met him, he rode his bicycle everywhere, and it was only in pretty recent years that he had to stop because his balance got too iffy. Mm-hmm. He changed bikes from one that was really tall to one that was easier to get on. Mm-hmm. But he'd step on the pedal and swing his leg over as he rolled. It was just beautiful to watch him get on his bike. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he had told us one time he felt that he developed Parkinson's because of Agent Orange exposure.
That's a fact, yes. And the VA acknowledged that, and he was on 100% disability not too long after I met him.
Yeah.
But it was a fight before they. Of course, there were many other veterans that fought that fight too, and they won it. And it was acknowledged that was a condition.
What do you think his memory or the example of his life holds for us now that are still here living in this time period, which is so different from kind of the decades he was active, but also in many ways similar and in many ways worse,
Mm-hmm. Do what you can with what you have, however you can. Because, at times he had nothing, and sometimes deliberately had nothing. Mm-hmm. But he always could do something.
The thing that I want to just convey to you, as well as your audience, is this. Speaking from the point of view of a Mexican-American or Chicano, living, most of my life in, on the border. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of respect and admiration for Anglo-Americans, who take a stance vis-a-vis the establishment on behalf of a minority or whatever aggrieved minorities there may be, that just don't take their own privilege for granted.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me a lot of hope, because I like, for example, with the convoy, I was just so impressed by the fact that thing was organized by largely by Anglo-Americans, and then they took that arduous trip all the way from all parts of the United States down through Laredo and then across Mexico and then into Central America.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, gave me the basis for that book, Sex is a Political Condition.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that gives me, I guess, hope, is that there is a side to Americans that is open-minded, that is critical, and that really values the principles upon which this country has been based.
Well, I just think that we can't forget how important it is to act. That's the lesson. And I keep figuring that in these times of economics and political and racial and the culture wars and everything, it seems like we have to do something dramatic. But what Jack is, I feel him saying is, take your time, do little things that will impact people because they're kind. And that's kind of something, every time I'm marching in one of these protests or something, I think back at Jack and I say, okay, when I get home, that's where the real work begins. It's not being in the street. Being in the street is, it's a billboard for resistance, but it's not resistance.
Thank you for joining Deceleration, deceleration.news online, with this reflection, remembering Jack Elder with Marisol Cortez and several of Elder's friends and comrades. And come on through over at deceleration.news. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter or become a member at a $5 a month or $10 a month level as we move forward together. Take care.